Mathematical and physical sciences research stream seminar of the School of Arts and Sciences. A big thanks to first promoter for taking care of in the background of the logistics. Now we have a very eminent speaker here, Dr. Narendra Ojha from the Physical Research Laboratory here in Ahmedabad, in our neighborhood. And Dr. Ojha, he did his PhD, or Dr. Narendra. So Narendra did his PhD from the Ahmedabad Research Institute of Observational Sciences, also acronym as SERIS in Nainital. He finished his PhD in 2012 and moved on to do his postdoc from a very well-renowned modeling group in Europe at the Max Planck Center for Chemistry in Mainz, right? With the well-celebrated scientist or modeler, climate modeler, Dr. Narendra Ojha. He is the group head currently at the Max Planck Institute for Chemistry. In 2018, Dr. Ojha moved to Physical Research Laboratory and joined as a faculty. And I met him for the first time in 2012 in Aris while he was about to submit his PhD. And then I welcomed him in Ahmedabad, where he joined as a faculty in P level. So also glad that we are collaborating on multiple fronts, and we have worked together on different campaigns as well as modeling initiatives, which Dr. Ojha's group at PRS is leading. And he's also training or guiding some of our PhD students from the School of Arts and Sciences, PhD physics students on the weather research and forecasting model. So Dr. Ojha has published over 60 peer-reviewed publications and book chapters, and in contribution to his, in recognition to his contribution to the field, the International Center for Theoretical Physics (ICTP) bestowed him with the ICTP Prize in 2021. So, without taking much time, I request Dr. Narendra Ojha to this wonderful seminar, as well as take us through this world of numbers and climate modeling. Over to you.
So, very good afternoon to all of you. So, I hope I am audible to everyone. Here,
For the recording, the mic will be legal.
Right. It is recording through the laptop mic, so it should be okay.
should be okay. So, thank you to Professor Aditya Vaid and Professor Rangarajan for giving me an opportunity to come and deliver this talk. And Aditya mentioned, I keep on visiting Ahmedabad University, and we kind of collaborate in atmospheric science area, where we try to utilize data sets, observational data sets, and try to do the simulation to kind of interpret them. So my institute is, that you all know that it is very near to your institute. So it is called PRL instead of Loco. And as you know that PRL was established immediately after India's independence in 1947. So when the country is celebrating Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, PRL is also celebrating its platinum jubilee. So you all may know that ozone hole was discovered, and then a lot of research happened in this area. And I was fortunate to be part of Max Planck Institute for Chemistry for several years, where Professor Ojha led this interpretations of the ozone hole and how mankind can avoid this type of issues. And this work was given a Nobel Prize. And the most important highlight of this type of work and recognizing this type of work is that it established beyond a doubt that the mankind can make significant impact on the Earth system. It has been a long journey, because for many decades people believe that humans are a smaller force when you see the whole planet of Earth and atmosphere. So it may be that most of the changes that air is experiencing or climate is experiencing, they are happening on its own because the system is such large. But this was such an set of studies which clearly established that mankind has become a force and which is governing the evolution of the Earth system. And Paul Crutzen later coined this word anthropocene, that it is a different era in which human is also contributing to the evolution of the Earth. So it is established that we can make significant impact, but out of all the processes that are happening, can we have some idea, estimation that what is humans' contribution? So another Nobel Prize was given recently in 2021 on the modeling of Earth system processes. So on the left is Manabe. Manabe was at Princeton, and it was his contribution which showed that if carbon dioxide is increasing, then atmospheric temperatures will increase. So he did this type of calculation long back in the Princeton with very limited computational resources. So we understand that not only mankind can impact the Earth system in a great way, but also that now we have capability to deduce what is the impact that is happening in the Earth system. So these are some historical major breakthroughs. Now we will discuss start from basics, and we will discuss what are the current problems that we are right now working, in particular in South Asia and Indian subcontinent. So this is some refreshing to you. Most of you know that most of Earth's atmosphere is basically nitrogen, and about 21% is oxygen. So most of 99% of atmosphere is filled by these two gases, and then all gases that we name, like carbon dioxide, we name nitrogen oxide, carbon monoxide, many gases are there. In fact, it will be an interesting question that how many different chemical species are present in Earth's atmosphere. So if you know, then it's okay. If you don't know, you will be surprised that thousands of species are there in the atmosphere. So now we have capability to actually measure many detailed composition of atmosphere. So what is most important here is that there are so many gases like sulfur dioxide. You know that if you burn coal, for example, in power plants, they emit this thing. Or if there is some volcanic eruption going on, they will inject a lot of sulfur dioxide. Your scooter cars, they emit nitrogen oxides. So there are so many gases. Then isoprene, this is a hydrocarbon. Trees are emitting it. So when global warming will happen, trees will emit more hydrocarbons. So that also we have to understand that. Again, this is a change in the we understood the Earth science. For a long time, it was understood that maybe humans are changing their contribution, but natural process, they are kind of a constant. But now it is very clear that if humans increase the global warming, then nature will also respond in different way. Natural fluxes of hydrocarbons will also change in terms of global warming. So this is what you call a feedback. You are doing something to nature is also responding to it. It is also doing more of it. And then they will participate in so many chemical reactions. So again, that number is really large. So in atmosphere, scientists already know about 5,000 or 6,000 different chemical reactions. So that is how complex the system is. And why, as I highlighted the role of so many reactions, so this ozone, which is so important for us, it is not directly emitted from any source. But because of hydrocarbons, nitrogen oxide, their reactions, ozone gets produced in the lower part of atmosphere. And then in the upper atmosphere, or stratosphere, it is coming from natural processes. One important species is hydroxyl. Hydroxyl is a radical, and its role is very important. So OH is very reactive species. So most of gases, OH will react with them and it will oxidize them to something else. And then those species will be removed ultimately from the atmosphere. That's why OH radical is called a detergent of the atmosphere. It cleans a lot of pollution, including methane, which is an important greenhouse gas. So methane is also removed significantly by OH radical. But a reverse conclusion is also that if something doesn't react with OH radical, then that means it will be long-lived because it doesn't react with the detergent, so it will keep on roaming in the earth. So those type of species are chlorofluorocarbons. They don't react with OH, so they can also enter in the stratosphere and have ozone layer. So that is how these important points we have to basically refresh. So there are so many processes that are injecting these gases. As I said that, transportation, it is giving us nitrogen oxides. Power plants, industries, they are burning fossil fuels, emitting sulfur. Trees are also emitting hydrocarbons, and car and industries are also emitting hydrocarbons. You know, ammonia is coming from fertilizers and agricultural practices. Biomass burning is also of different types. Sometimes wildfires happen because of lightning strike when season is appropriate. So there will be large fires, especially in the US. You always, most of the time, hear about it. In Himalaya also, forest fires are happening a lot. But then another type of fires is crop residue burning. That is done by farmers when they have grown up one type of crops and they want to shift to another crop. They want to clear their fields. So easiest way for them is the just burn the field. So that is the, so this is a different type of fires. So you can see there is such a diverse set of processes that are affecting our atmosphere. And as I said that these species, they don't just stay like this, they react with each other in presence of sunlight, and they also form something which was not even emitted. So these all set of processes are happening. So if somebody asks like what is bad for our health, so most bad is basically particulate matter, especially the one that is of very small size. So Aditya is really leading a very big project on that, how to continuously measure fine particulate matter and better understand their health impacts. And after that, ozone near Earth surface is not good. It is quite good in the above, when it is around 25-30 kilometers above Earth surface, but near Earth surface it is not good, and it can harm vegetation, plants also, and also human beings. So there are significant health impacts. So if we alter the chemical composition of the atmosphere, it will affect directly the climate. It will also affect human health, and it will also affect the growth of plants. So this is really a large interdisciplinary area which is coming out of this. So as I said that if ozone is up, this is your ozone layer around 25 kilometers above Earth's surface. So this is significant ozone. But near Earth's surface, ozone is a pollutant, and here it is mostly natural. But near Earth's surface, it is coming from different type of pollutants. So just 2 days ago, you know, this date appeared 16 September. Today is 18 September. So just 2 days ago, the world celebrated the World Ozone Day. This day is to remind us global commitment to protect the ozone layer and pursue the Montreal Protocol that all the ozone depleting substances, they are not emitted by any other process. But while we are getting better settled with protection of this ozone layer, we are actually getting more and more bad ozone in the lower part of the troposphere, that is tropospheric. So in future and even today, while discussing ozone day, we need to be watchful for tropospheric ozone also, which is a major air pollutant. It is also greenhouse gas. So greenhouse gases are those which have ability to absorb the long wave radiation emitted by Earth's surface. So if you do a simple calculation, take Earth's temperature as 300 Kelvin or whatever room temperature, and see in what wavelength it will emit as a dead body, you will come up to a number about 10 micrometers. And interestingly, ozone has a absorption feature around 10 micrometers. So ozone is considered to be very effective greenhouse gas. So these points we need to understand, and why we are more interested in this type of gas. Just to refresh our mind, although the industry and the population, they are spread globally, and in fact they are much less in the polar region. Actually, the ozone hole was most significant in the Arctic and Antarctic. So what happens that when we are doing some process, once we are injecting something into the atmosphere, we have no clue how it will actually translate. So we are emitting these gases everywhere in the globe, but because the polar regions, they are so cold that there are some special type of clouds, polar stratospheric clouds, they form. They allow this type of chemical reactions that the most severe ozone losses, they happen in the polar regions of the Earth. So this again highlights the complexity of the Earth system. So this I will skip. So basically, in the lower part of atmosphere, most of hydrocarbons, carbon monoxide, they are combining and producing ozone. And as we see that above the troposphere, there is this ozone layer. So sometimes ozone can also come down from there. And the major losses are basically either through chemical process or it can also be deposited. But note that ozone is not a very water soluble gas. So if it is just raining, you don't expect that ozone will go away. Ozone gets more dry deposited.
I was wondering by what type of processes the stratospheric ozone gets transferred to troposphere. I will come to that.
To very quickly, to mix, to have a vertical mixing in the atmosphere, if temperature is getting down, if you are going vertically up, then that will help convection. But what happens in the stratosphere, temperature is rising with the height. So that is a kind of stable layer. You cannot just have a vertical mixing. So normally stratosphere to troposphere exchange is limited. But there are some ways that in mid latitudes, when this circulation from tropics goes up to 30° north and then 30 to 60° north. So when air is sinking, they may bring more ozone from stratosphere to troposphere. And then through horizontal movement, it may come to your region. So we have done some studies on that. I will talk more about that. So what happens that we will make a very important point here, that there are so many processes happening together and there are so many complexities that it is not possible to consider all the complexities within a model. We have to see the preference. So for example, if we have to look at whole chemistry of ozone formation and destruction, we can only do at it as a simple one location, which you call as a box. You just take a box of atmosphere and just try to calculate there. You cannot have the whole chemistry simulated for whole globe. That will be too computationally intensive. So current scenario is this way, that from the satellites we can see that nitrogen oxides, they are very high over most of East Asia, that is the China region. And in the India, this region is called Indo-Gangetic Plain. So the population density is highest in the world in this part of the region, about 1000 person per kilometer square. And ozone is also really, tropospheric ozone is also high across the Indo-Gangetic Plain and also the Chinese region. And you can compare it with the population. So it is important because as we understood that ozone can affect our health, it can warm the region, and then it is also not good for the agriculture and plants. And where the most densely populated region is there you are seeing so much ozone. So it is really a question to understand what is the role of different processes that are giving this much ozone. And to quickly see that, Professor Lelywild wrote a paper that if we look at the PM 2.5, that was aerosols and ozone together, so a lot of health effects are happening in South Asia, most of India, especially in the Gangetic Plain and also in the China region. And plants and vegetation, if that loss is calculated, so it is suggested that the losses are really significant. Of course, I will not make much more conclusions from here, because you have to remember that these are model-based estimations, and sometimes some curves which work nicely for suppose North America and Europe, they may not work very nicely for Indian region. So as a new PhD student and master's student, they expect that more studies are done from India and better accurate curves like how plants of India will respond to ozone, how human health in Indian people respond to suppose aerosols. Those types of curves have to be established from this region. So of course we are motivated, but there are a lot of uncertainties also that we have to keep in mind. And with the temperature change, of course, as I said that if temperature is warming, so there will be more emissions from natural sources. And not just that, the reactions will also become more fast. So this climate warming, it is kind of pushing the air quality even to more ozone pollution. So, and these problems are not only important for India, because India is in the tropics. So the convection is very strong over India. So whatever processes are happening near Earth's surface, they are convectively emitted to up to 10-12 kilometers. And because of this, what you call anticyclone of monsoon, it really mixes from South Asia to as far as the Mediterranean. So if you will see the satellite-based picture, you will see a lot of ozone and aerosols distributed in this region in the upper troposphere. So the studies that we are referring to and the questions that we are discussing, they are not only important for South Asia and India for local problems, but they can have large impact on the atmospheric composition of large regions. So to answer these questions, what are the approaches which scientists, students, they are taking up? So simplest and starting point is ground-based labs. Many scientists are having laboratories to which they can take samples coming from inlets coming from just outside university, and they can measure what is the composition, what are the levels of ozone and related parameters. Some people also have lasers. They point into the sky and try to see where more aerosols are there. So these are some basic experiments. And then balloons. You can put several instruments in a balloon and then try to have some transmitter from there and get the data of the vertical. In Europe now and US, major focus is aircraft-based cameras. They allow us to actually go to any region of interest. For example, during wildfires, you can exactly go into the plumes and see that what is the maximum extent of the emission from the wildfires. So aircrafts are really, really powerful technique. And satellites are there for a long time. In fact, we mentioned that ozone hole was also monitored continuously through satellites. So nowadays also satellite programs are becoming more and more useful. They also have important satellite instruments. For example, INSAT. And they all are producing a lot of data. So we have an idea like what is there happening in that. We can have a good idea on the what exactly is happening in the atmosphere. But to interpret like which source is causing this, what is happening. So then we need to go for simulation. So this is our new supercomputer PRI. In honor of Vikram Sarabhai, we call it Param Vikram High Performance Computing. So we need this type of computers to process this large volume of data. And to better understand like if we are seeing something, so why it is happening this way. And as I said, that there are processes that are happening on the global scales. Then there are processes that are happening within a region. Then there are really local scale processes. So we have to really decide which type of simulation we have to do. And for this whole system that is divided into different types of boxes, different boxes. And for each box, we have to calculate what all are the sources, like how much it can produce, how much it can directly emit it, how much can be produced, that is production, how much will get out of that region, so that is flux out, then how much chemical loss is happening, what will be the deposition. So each and every process we have to estimate. We have to discretize the atmosphere into computational grade and all this. Yes, sir.
So what is the M?
M, mass of this species X.
Okay.
So suppose,
Change of mass.
yeah. So basically it is a kind of equation of continuity. That change in the mass will be basically sum of this how much source is there minus what loss. So that will decide the change in the mass. So these terms have to be estimated. So different scales modeling is done. So box model is simplest. Suppose we take whole Ahmedabad as a single box, or we take a regional scale model. Suppose entire India, or maybe just magnetic plane. We consider that model, and we try to do it high resolution. Or if some processes are really important, we have to see the transport coming from Europe to America or something. So we have to go for a global scale simulation. But please note that when you are going larger region, you have to compromise on the resolution. So basically, you cannot, if you have to resolve the Himalaya, you cannot go to a global model. It will be very difficult. But if you run a small region, then it is like camera, you want to zoom. So if you want to zoom, then you take the smaller field of it. And then reanalysis datasets are becoming popular. The thing is that in the conventional models, each process you have to understand fully, and then you have to give a mathematical treatment. But not all processes are understood explicitly. So reanalysis is basically whatever model is producing, if you have some measurements nearby. So you try to minimize the difference between the model with the help of the observational data. So it is like adding some non-physical terms to improve the model performance. So this is also quite popular nowadays. So these 3-4 things are there, but we have to see like what type of application we are going to do. So I will explain each thing with an example so that it is communicated nicely. So you all might have experienced this COVID-19 lockdown. So this is a global paper. You can see that all of a sudden many people were asked to stay at home. So in India, this was the level of particulate matter pollution, and all of a sudden during 2020, as compared to last 2-3 years, during lockdown the pollution was really less. In particular in Ahmedabad, if you see the data, so left panel is basically observations of Ahmedabad. So you can see carbon monoxide was down during lockdown, NOx was down during lockdown, but somehow surface ozone was rising. So this type of feature, if you are seeing in the observation, then you have to perform simulations like what it is happening actually. So you can see that during lockdown, when traffic emission and many emissions were less, so about 25% change was because of that, but it was also a transition from winter to summer season. So temperature was rising, and also natural emissions, those were rising. So they kind of compensated. So we have to, when we suggest as a scientific community, when we suggest or we recommend something to the governments for planning and ozone control, we have to take into account of the atmospheric variability that are happening, so that we better understand that okay, this should be the effect of our intervention. So it tells us that if you only reduce nitrogen oxides, so ozone will not reduce, it can even increase. So this type of features we can only understand. Then, as we said that we want to see the whole profile of ozone. So this is one type of balloon. So our IMD, India Meteorological Department, they also keep on launching this type of balloon. And then this box, white thermocol box, it is having inside an ozone instrument. And outside also this white box, small box is stick to it. That is a meteorological sounder.
So is there an understanding why in Ahmedabad the ozone went up?
Yes. So what happened that if we only reduce nitrogen oxide, then nitrogen oxide was not only producing ozone, it was also helping to titrate ozone, reduce ozone also. So either when we are reducing nitrogen oxide, we also reduce other precursors of ozone simultaneously, and we do not increase temperature much. So that's why COVID lockdown, there were so many studies, but they many times just compared pre-lockdown during lockdown. But if you do simulations, then you actually understand what is actually happening there.
How do they do simulation?
How do they do the simulation? Right. So this particular simulation. So what happens at any place of Earth, if you know the latitude? So first thing is to do some radiative transfer calculation. That in this particular season, this point of Earth in cloud-free condition, how much radiation should reach this point? And based on that, you have to see the different reactions which need sunlight. So you have to, and with these measurements basically, so these numbers of these species, they were monitored by Central Pollution Control Board of in Manila. So they have monitored this data. So using these concentrations, and we know the what amount of radiation is coming. So each reaction has been calculated. That okay, these many production reactions are happening, these many loss reactions are happening. And when during lockdown, the concentration of these species changed. So we again estimate how much loss and production has changed. So from there, we estimate that what is the role of change in their concentration that was basically human driven, and what was the change because of weather. Because it was spring, then it started April, May time, when lockdown was implemented. So because of change on weather, that was also considered in this calculation.
So some input is coming from the observation itself.
Yes.
And then we know the model, and then we.
Yes. So this model is basically called master mechanism. The master mechanism, meaning of master mechanism is that it is a set of reactions. So the model is basically a set of reactions that happen in the atmosphere. So if you provide it the temperature and some initial concentration of different chemical species, it can tell us how it will evolve with time. So this is a very simple model. We will come to more complex model also, like this. So this is slightly more complicated model. So when we launch this type of balloons from the Himalaya, this is Aries Nainital. It is Nainital is about 2 kilometers in the mountains. So from there, this type of big balloons we have launched. So this is myself, and she is Dr. Tapaswini Sarangi, who works in Ahmedabad University. So we used this type of balloons to see the vertical profile of ozone. And interestingly, we observed large ozone enhancement in around 10 to 12 kilometer height. So in the start, I have shown that this whole Gangetic Plain and Himalaya region, stratospheric column ozone is very high. But here we are seeing that it is not high in the lower region where human activities are more. It is high in the somewhere in the middle troposphere. So it was giving us some different signatures. So we used a global scale model, and we first checked whether the model also can reproduce this type of structure which we are seeing in the Himalaya. So model several times it was able to capture. So we try to track from where this ozone is appearing to the Himalaya. So what we found is that this ozone is actually there are two lines, and one is total ozone, and one ozone is basically the natural ozone in the model that is basically forming in the stratosphere. So in the peak region, whole of the ozone is basically coming from the stratosphere. It is natural ozone, except during monsoon when it is vertical mixing is greater. And this stratospheric ozone is getting transported from long distances to Himalaya. Some is coming from the northwest, some is coming from there, and some even the Pacific Ocean. So this type of, it is called intercontinental transport. So we observed that in the Indo-Gangetic Plain and Himalaya region, although a lot of human activities are happening, but large enhancements are also happening because of the long-range intercontinental transport of ozone. So this was a significant update in terms of understanding the natural process that can enhance ozone and thereby affect the climate of Himalaya. Yes, yes.
So what are the physical parameters that goes into this kind of modeling? So what kind of physics goes into this kind of
Right. So these models basically have each process is written as a one program. For example, I mentioned first about master chemical mechanism. So that code is basically having a long set of chemical reactions. But this model needs amount of radiation that is reaching to the point. So then there is a radiative transfer. So you got two ports. One is chemical process, one you are getting the radiative transfer. To get the radiative transfer, you have to have understanding of several other parameters. And then you have to have a code for convection. So this way, if you go one by one each process, so Earth and in Earth atmosphere system, for each process we have to have one code. Now the thing is that the processes that are understood explicitly, for example, in set of chemical reactions, if we have all the list of chemical reaction, suppose from laboratory experiment, we know that O3 react with NO with this reaction rate, and this rate coefficient changes with temperature like this. So this is called an explicit treatment of the process. But many times what is happening, we do not have an explicit understanding how it is happening. So then what is to be done, for example, in case of convection, in case of boundary layer evolution, so we do not have exact understanding that it should, we can have a nice model of that. So then people do parameterization. Parameterization is writing boundary layer height variation or some other, maybe some other process, convection or anything, in terms of other parameters like temperature, humidity profile. If you have a good humidity profile, so you can, from there you can say that okay, convection should be triggered in the model. If you have a temperature profile, so from there you can define a boundary layer height. So these are called the parameterizers. So several processes, they are written explicitly, but many processes, they are parameterized in the which we cannot write exactly. And our focus has been more on the gases, ozone, aerosols, but there is a full-fledged what we call a weather model and visualization model that is into place. And the fundamental to these models is basically what I mentioned is equation of continuity, like what all processes are adding to some species and what all processes are removing them. And the next important process is what we call Navier-Stokes equation, which is basically telling that at a air parcel, what all forces are acting. So you have to get the net acceleration. So all forces include your horizontal movements, then pressure gradient forces. So vertical pressure gradient is there, horizontal pressure gradient is there, gravity is there, and then since Earth is rotating, so Coriolis force is also. So there are so many forces. So you have to get basically write Navier-Stokes equation, which calculates basically the rate of change of velocity in terms of different forces. So that is a long process. But in this type of model, when suppose we want to calculate ozone, so most of the time this weather variability we directly take from a different model. So here we focus more on the ozone and related species. But that is its background.
So when you're talking about, I'm just trying to compare this with the stellar atmosphere,
Okay.
for example. So, I mean, because you have radiation coming from inside the star, and then you have stellar atmosphere, and then you can sort of do radiated transfer and find out that what is it that you're using. Now, when you're talking about radiated transfer in these cases, so what is the radiation that you consider? I mean, talking about the radiation from the sun, I mean, or you consider is there any radiation from the earth? I mean,
Right. So we have to consider both. Because our near temperature that is controlled more by radiation coming from the Earth surface. Because this air, this atmosphere, that is very transparent to the visible light. So Earth atmosphere is not absorbing strongly the visible light. So that will go directly to Earth surface. But Earth's atmosphere is kind of opaque to the long wave infrared range. So to conclude on the temperature profiles, we have to have calculation of entire electromagnetic spectrum. We have to take care of UV light that is getting absorbed in the stratosphere. Then what is coming through the troposphere is basically most of UV visible light. Then that is coming and Earth surface is heated, and then it is emitting mostly long wave. So long wave and short wave, both balance is basically determining the temperature structure of Earth atmosphere. So there are different parameterizations for radiation calculations. So global models give this advantage that we can also see intercontinental transport. But within a region, they pose strong limitations that they cannot resolve nearby regions. For example, this is Nainital data and this is Pantnagar. They are observations data. And model is basically seeing high altitude Nainital mountains and nearby Gangetic plain station. Then it is not able to resolve. It is giving you almost same line. So then we need kind of high resolution regions. So in which
What's the model?
this model was called
No, I mean, the model is the red line,
yeah, model is this red line.
but it is modeling for which area?
It
Or as far as it's concerned, they're both the same area.
Yeah, so it is giving almost same line for this Pantnagar as well as mountain top. So this line I have drawn, as you can see, red line is saying Pantnagar and observation Pantnagar is this dots. So model should also in principle could have come near to it, but it is model is giving you much high, and just for scientific interest, if we put high altitude data there, so model seems to match better with the high altitude data than the actual station. So what is problem with model is if you want to simulate entire globe, it is not able to resolve mountain and nearby low altitude regions. If we have to really get interested into Himalayan and nearby regions, we have to change to the this type of model when we kind of cut rest of the world, and we do the high resolution simulations for this region. And and as someone of you asked, so different process, like you can see cloud, long wave radiation, short wave radiation. So all different process, gas phase, then aerosol process, boundary layer height. So all processes, there have to be a separate scientific understanding, a dedicated program that calculates, and those all feedback it is submitting to your main code. And none of scientists is expert actually on different processes. Everyone has expertise on some of the process, but these codes are giving you the feedbacks. And how this difference is coming now. So these two plots I am generating from the global models, which I am saying that they have problem of resolution. So you see the entire globe, entire magnetic plane. TAMS model is showing you same. And MERA2 is model developed by NASA. TAMS is developed by European Center for Medium Range Weather Forecast in UK. So they are showing whole magnetic plane like one color. MERA2 is also showing almost same color, but it is telling you too high, it is telling you too low. But when we run at a high resolution, so these are 100 km by 100 km, and this is 10 km by 10. So 10 times better resolution we are running simulations. So there's so many features are popping up. So sometimes if you use similar type of input, so in principle they should give you mass conservation. Basically, whatever you sum up here, that should match there. But many times inputs are also different. When we are running India, sometimes we have better information on emissions of India. So that type of improvements are also done here, as compared to what US groups are running and Europe groups are running. So the idea is that through high resolution, here also this whole Himalayan Tibetan plateau, you can better resolve using high resolution. So the advantage is that if we incorporate regional information of emissions and also we put better resolution of topography, we represent Himalaya with high resolution terrain data, and also choose the parameterizations which work better for Indian conditions, because for other regions sometimes convection is not that strong. Boundary layer height may not be that high in the US. So if we choose schemes suitably which may better work for India, so then we can resolve more features. And what type of advantage we can get from this? So we can generate high resolution data of different important gases for the Indian condition, like carbon monoxide we have generated. And in start, I said that hydroxyl is also very important, but it is very difficult to measure. Hydroxyl measurements are difficult, and very advanced laser-induced fluorescence techniques are required. So in India, so far, such machines have not been operated, not built in Indian institutions. But from model, we can actually simulate this also. So models give us a first-hand information on the parameters which we were interested, but so far experiments are not done. So you can see this is a popular ship track in the Indian Ocean. So there, this hydroxyl radical is getting regenerated by the ship activity. So that also you can see in the model. Yes. Go ahead.
How we can choose the parameterization scheme if we have to implement some physics in the model, like if we need to apply Navier-Stokes theorem or different physics, physical things. So how we know कि this physics parameterization scheme will be suitable.
So the thing is, which I was discussing with already. So the thing is that if some process is explicitly understood, then you can write it as a detailed system. The problem comes when we do not have a clear understanding, and then we have to have a parameterization. So parameterization is basically a relation of one target variable in terms of 2, 3, 4 different variables to have this type of equation. So most of parameterization, if you will see, they are produced by the field campaign datasets. They measure surface properties, different properties, and they measure the target value. We need some technique. For example, if you are talking about boundary layer, if you launch regularly balloons, you can see at which level temperature inversion is happening. So some way you are reducing boundary layer from experiments, and you are measuring several other parameters. You are looking at the correlations, and then you are reaching to a parameterization, which is motivated which is not a process-based understanding, but it is kind of relation that is telling you that if you have 3-4 variables, you can calculate this. So these type of parameterizations have been developed by field studies in several places in the world. The issue is that most of these parameterizations are developed for different parts of the world and not exactly suiting Indian conditions. So the way forward is that we conduct intensive field counseling. What is the problem is that different research groups, they measure certain variables, but they do not measure or collaborate with several other experimentalists and produce a rigorous data set. If we measure all important parameters together, we can develop very much the India-specific parameters.
So we need to compare with the observational data sets in order to get the better understanding of what parameterization scheme we can use.
Yes.
We cannot directly.
Yes. So as a modeler also, if we are running a model, we should try to validate each and every parameter possible. As a modeler, we need to collaborate with many experimenters. This is a major limitation that people suppose measure ozone or black carbon. They compare it with only ozone and black carbon data, and they say that Indian emission is less. Maybe there is more emission happening. They don't check that okay, convection may be wrong in the model. Maybe boundary layer height is much more developing in the model. If boundary layer would have been right, you would have got right black carbon. So it is very important for expert. If you are an experimentalist, it is very important that you collect several important variables together. And if you are doing modeling, you validate different parameters, especially the transport processes, vertical mixing parameters. If you validate, then you get really better understanding on the model's limitations. And yes, go ahead.
Once you have a model, so I don't confirm this, but I confirm stat parameters. Once you have a model, you check for model accuracy.
Yes. This is where we are led.
That you quantify in terms of like you.
Yes, here. So what we have to do, suppose we simulate a ozone for entire India using the model, and then so many research centers, they are operating machines. So they can measure ozone. They can take air sample from outside, and we know that ozone absorbs UV light. So they put a UV lamp and see how much light is getting attenuated. So they estimate that okay, this will be ozone concentration. So based on these colors are which are filled in the circles, they are experimental values from different parts of India. So we are comparing our simulation, and we are doing 2-3 different simulations. So because input parameters emissions, and in India emission data is not very accurate. Sometimes we have one emission inventory, another emission inventory comes after 2-3 years. So we do not know how emissions have changed. So what we did, we used same model, but did the simulation 3 times from 3 different emission inputs. One is this global inventory. One this was a field campaign by NASA. This was another field campaign. So then we compare the observations wherever they are available. So we see okay, Delhi and this region. Measurements are also falling in orange color, red color. Our model is also giving that. Here Gujarat also the observation and model they are matching nice. But there are several regions where there is significant discrepancy, like in the northeast, the model measurements. So it is very important, as I was answering to her, that to validate model output against measurement data. And it is not useful just to have 1 or 2 type of measurement. It is important to compare several data sets. So this last figure, I am doing some averaging. So entire India, if you see the average ozone variation is this thing, black color line. So what is changing is this is time from 0 hour in the morning night to going all the way 23rd hour. So this is whole diagonal cycle. So this black line is basically the average of all these stations which I am showing here. And then I am putting the lines for our simulations. Green color, red color, blue and pink. So we are running different type of simulation with different inputs. So 3 simulations I am repeating just by changing the emission data. So I can see that if I take one emission data as compared to another emission data, basically my simulation can change very much. So it is possible that you use the model, but because you use a different input, your findings, your conclusion may change. and not just the emission input. I am doing one extra simulation in which I am putting some extra reaction, some different type of simplification of chemical parameters. So then also ozone is basically changing a lot. So it is important that when we run a model, we compare those simulations with the observational data, and it is, if we are seeing this evaluation result, it is not good to use this pink simulation. Better to go for blue or better to go for red or green. Red or green are closest to the observation. But please note, it is not possible in case of Earth atmospheric processes to have a very perfect match. So there are a lot of factors. So we cannot expect that model and observation will kind of exactly match with each other. But still we should see, we should try to find a good agreement. And again, to answer your question, this was a ship experiment. So ISRO was leading this campaign. On ship, they performed ozone measurements across this Bay of Bengal. And this blue line is our simulation. So we are taking model output along the ship track. We are also changing with the time, dates, everything. So you see black dots are experimental value from ship, and this blue line is our simulation. So this type of validations are important. So we can see that, okay, model can capture this. Then still we are comparing the model with aircraft applications. So from Chennai, they used to fly Lufthansa Airlines to Frankfurt, and through some scientific collaborations, they put several instruments on the Lufthansa airplane. So whenever it flew from Chennai, they got one profile like this. It took some time from getting the machine on and getting accurate data. Some junk may be produced. Then it was accurate data in this altitude. So this is how water vapor profiles are comparing this between model and objects. So it is telling you that, okay, this type of simulation is also matching with the observations. Comparison with satellites. So you can see that when you are running model, you have to really go into details. You have to measure surface stations, which I was showing. Then we saw stick-based measurements. Then we saw with aircraft measurements. Now we are coming to satellites. Satellites don't measure directly species. Satellites basically measure radiation. So they are measuring formaldehyde. These are 3 different satellites, and this is our simulation. So OMI is a NASA satellite, Drone2 is European satellite, Shiamachi also is European satellite. So you can see that this type of high formaldehyde is also seen in the satellite. These type of evaluations are important because there are no ground-based data for this. So we run a model, it tells us that there is so much formaldehyde in the western coast of India, but whether it is a real feature or not, how we know? So we are looking at different satellites. But interestingly, not just there are difference between model and satellite, but there are a lot of difference between one satellite to another satellite to another. So we also have to have accurate ground data to first check which satellites are giving very good data, and those satellites we can use to improve the model. Because if we just
we are in the same time.
Yes, their time and things are same, but their algorithm, how they treat what, and satellites, as I said, they are not directly sampling formaldehyde. They are seeing the ultraviolet radiation, visible radiation, and they are trying to figure out what could have been the atmospheric condition which would have let this much light coming to the satellite. So this is a very indirect way to look at the atmosphere. So satellites always need validation by ground experiments or by lunar aircraft.
Within these different ways, what level you can say that they are really different in terms of are they very different or
So you see, you have to see yourself. So you can see that this is our simulation. It tells us that in the East Gangetic Plain and Western coast, we are seeing major hotspots. If you see in the OMI NASA satellite, they are also saying that Western coast has a hotspot. So we can say that broadly this feature is there. Also, this East Gangetic Plain, this feature is there. So other satellites, they are not giving as much as formaldehyde, but if you see, they are also showing some signatures, right? So satellite techniques, they are not very established. They are still working on it. And
adding on to that question, is there a mathematical way to say that if the two models of the two satellites is the way without even looking at the picture? Do we have to look at the picture to understand it?
models are the same.
So what we have to do is, we can apply statistical techniques. And normally in our case, if you are taking measurement and you are seeing one sigma variability into it, you are seeing model and we are seeing one sigma variability, like this, na? You have some variability in the measurement, you have some variability in the model. If somehow they are within one sigma, you can say that they are agreeing to each other.
So you mean you're doing some sort of hypothesis test? If the two models are the same or not?
Two models, you are talking two models
Or
and
two certain data.
two separate. Yeah, so I did not do that much analysis. The reason is that it is obvious that these satellites have better agreement than this satellite. This is simply out. If you will calculate the one sigma also, it will come out of that. So clearly there are differences between different satellites. But that is the way you have to compare. They are coming within one sigma, two sigma, they are beyond three sigma. So that type of comparison and estimation of those metrics people do.
Sorry, how do you know which satellite is, the observations are better? Because you want to test your model or check your model. And it could be that the model is wrong. And whatever the last one is the right one. So it may be true that one of these matches with the model, but then both of those could be wrong and something else. So you need ground validation or something to know which of these three satellites.
Right, so
is present.
that is how we are concluding. So what we are concluding from this picture is, we are not concluding that our model, of course, we can be biased that our model is at least matching with NASA satellite. So it's okay, it is not matching. Sometimes scientists just crop this figure here, we just put this in the population. But we put these two figures also there. And we made this point that we need ground-based network to validate both satellites and then model. We have to check which satellite can better work for Indian conditions. And right now there is some plan going on that we have India-based network of formaldehyde measurement and possibly Indian satellite to measuring formaldehyde. Yes, please.
So.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes. Okay, so, I'm just taking it from, what you're was pointing out. So when you are comparing model and satellite.
Yes.
So, I mean, you can create, so what is the resolution of your model? You're talking about spatial resolution, what is the resolution of your model and the resolution of your satellite? That's one question. And the other question is, I mean, you can very well, compare them and come up with a residual map. Right? And then you can suggest that whether your model is, validating your observation or the other way around.
See, actually,
So,
you try to do that. We did not try to do that for the simple reason, because there is no preferred conclusion that which satellite is better than other satellites. So as Raghu pointed out, that maybe the satellite which is farthest from my model, maybe that was correct. So the thing is, unless we have a ground-based check that okay, this should be the level satellite should predict, and satellites are tuned to the ground validation. So those type of exercise we are not doing deliberately. What we are suggesting within the ISRO and with our collaborations, that we should try to measure different hydrocarbons. And you may note that it is very difficult to measure hydrocarbons. So you need gas chromatograph or some mass spectrometer, very advanced type of thing. And here you are trying to deduce that from space. So there is a lot of technical experimental work that has to go into this. So we are not deliberately, as we said, we are more involved in the modeling. So we are putting it to experimental groups to look into this.
Since you are also working in a similar domain, in the sense we have just one ray of light, and that is all that we have. In the sense, it will give us whatever information we want to deduce, right? We apply different kind of filters. If we look at different wavelengths, we look at polarization and so on, so on. But the light which the satellite measures, of which the telescope is collecting, is the same. And then,
my question was, why is the satellite data different for different? In the sense, like
Algorithms.
resolution different. Algorithms. Because your tracer is same, right? You're tracing formaldehyde. But
I will answer.
okay.
What happens? As I said, that satellites don't directly take samples like experimentals. Satellites have only amount of radiation that it is reaching to them. They have different filters, how much light they are getting in UV, visible, different things. So they have to guess that if in the atmosphere, this compound would have been this much. That's why it is reflecting or attenuating this much particular wavelength. But what happens? There are several possible combinations that would have given you same amount of radiation. Maybe this is this much, but that another gas was this much. Maybe this gas was not there. Something. So the solution of this type of problem, when you have net radiation reaching to the instrument, but you are guessing the atmosphere, solution is not unique. So how satellite experts reach to a number? So they try to use a priori information. What was expected in this? So suppose there are 10 possible solutions of this problem, 10 possible formaldehyde values. So they will take that formaldehyde values which matches with their a priori knowledge that this should be the same. So satellite retrievers, they depend very much on the a priori information given into retrieval. So these a priori information, they are often derived from the models. So if some scientist launching a satellite from Europe, he may rely on his model, his a priori, and he will do it in this way. He may measure some particular wavelength, some other filters he will use. So depending upon the instrument and depending upon the algorithm and a priori profile that he is feeding into satellite, different groups will get to the different depth. This is different from the ground-based experiments that people like Aditya are performing. There's a very set procedure, they will follow that and they will reach to similar. But here there is very different result. So this is why we always say that if you are taking satellite-based atmospheric data, you should always look into the validation. So maybe I will take 5 more minutes. How much time is there?
I think.
But the good thing is that we have a lot of discussion. So 15 minutes that I needed in the end, it gets into this. We applied this model into a very important problem. Everyone was talking on this problem. It was very much in the media that there is a widespread haze of pollution in the magnetic plane, entire magnetic plane. Towards October, you can see the pollution was like 60 to 90 microgram per meter cube. I'm talking about aerosol. But November and December, if you see, this whole became yellow. This was started building here itself, but it grown further. So this we are calling a widespread enhancement in particulate matter. So many believe that it is coming from the biomass burning being done in the Punjab and Haryana. So we did some simulations, and we in the final model we dropped the fires from the model, and we tried to see how much change it made to the output. So we see that in October, actually fires were very important. In November also they were really important, and they were not just affecting Punjab, Haryana and Delhi, although we hear that way in the media. Actually, they are affecting entire North Central India, these fires. But most important conclusion is December, when this haze is most pronounced, there is almost no change brought to the entire magnetic plane because of fires. Fires which are happening in the Himalaya, forest fires, they are just confined because of topography and winds. They are just affecting the Himalaya. They are not coming down to the magnetic plane. So what is left? So if you cut just biomass burning, the rest everything becomes the human other activities. And this boundary layer height, you see, there is strong vertical mixing. This was 400, 500 meter. It was still 400, but in December it was around 200 meter. This region is most affected severely by the haze problem. So biomass burning has no role. Boundary layer height is really shallow. So whatever human activities, anthropogenic emissions are happening, they are confined in very small volume near our surface. So this was a problem in which we applied this model. This I will skip. One important problem that we are working with is that in future people will try to reduce aerosols. Aerosols are most harmful for human health. So our major focus is on the aerosols. Second most focus is on ozone because of health and because of ozone's impact on the plants and agriculture. So what we are seeing is that because of aerosols feedback to the radiation, if aerosols will be reduced, then basically boundary layer will also change, and because of aerosols, this effect is happening that boundary layer is basically coming down. So that will have a negative impact on ozone and also on the fine particulate matter. So what is happening is aerosols, they are reducing the light that was coming and producing ozone. When you are improving in terms of aerosols, you are indirectly increasing ozone. So that is one aerosol direct radiation impact that will have a negative effect, but it is also affecting boundary layer and in general meteorology. This is very new result. We are still working in this direction. And what we are trying to communicate is that when we focus on one type of pollution or one type of problem, we can, this type of models help us to assess in advance what could be the side effects so that we can better plan.